Everyone has one or two secrets they'd rather keep hidden. I'm no exception. Back in the day, I was quite a wild child, although now I've become a demure and unassuming woman. Losing my parents at 15, I quickly went astray and joined a gang of troublemakers. I gathered some of the girls from the gang and formed a ladies' group. Thanks to being forced to learn wrestling by my dad since childhood, I was known locally for my overwhelming strength, surpassing even the boys. My life in that world came to an end after meeting a certain person. But living such a life, it seems you inevitably accumulate some lingering issues. My name is Nancy. Now 35, I live as an ordinary housewife, working at a local supermarket. With my light makeup and quiet demeanor, no one would guess that I once wore flashy makeup and rode around on motorcycles. Yes, I was a member of a delinquent group and the leader of a ladies' gang. But then I met my husband, Joshua, and everything changed. It all started 10 years ago, during a clash with a rival gang, when Joshua unexpectedly intervened. That gang used to start fights at every gathering. One day, a particularly fierce brawl broke out. Joshua joined in to save his brother, a member of the rival gang. As members of both groups were falling, Joshua and I were the last ones standing. I even remember Joshua laughing at his mistake, realizing his brother wasn't even there. His dignified appearance somehow struck me, and I found myself speaking to him. "Hey, you're pretty cool." "Me? Really? Looking like this? You must have some strange tastes." "Were you calling out for someone named Noah? Did you find him?" "No. It turns out my brother wasn't here." That's how our slow, private conversation began. Joshua's brother, it seems, was an irredeemable delinquent. Joshua had even taken up boxing, trying to reform him. Joshua himself admitted he couldn't stand to ignore wrongdoing. He struck me as a man brimming with a sense of justice. Through our conversation, we grew close. Over time, we met more often, and it became clear that we had feelings for each other. But back then, Joshua despised delinquents. Despite our mutual attraction, my involvement in the delinquent world prevented our relationship from progressing. Finally, Joshua said that if I left the gang for good, he'd want to be with me. Tired of the senseless fights, I took the opportunity to leave the group. We started dating and got married 5 years later. The group I was part of got disbanded by a rival faction 2 years after I left. After marrying Joshua, I completely transformed into a calm and graceful woman. But recently, our peaceful life was threatened by a certain neighbor, Joshua's sister, Sonia, and her husband. One day, as I was about to see Joshua off to work, the doorbell rang. Who could that be? "I'll check." The next moment, Joshua looked surprised. "Sonia?" He mentioned his sister, whom I knew. I had met her once at a family dinner. "Hey Joshua, we've moved next door, starting today. Please take care of us." "Hello, I'm Tony, Sonia's husband. Well, looking forward to your cooperation." "You are?" The two of them started off with a disrespectful attitude. But since one was Joshua's sister, I couldn't be too confrontational. We get along well with the in-laws, so I didn't want to cause unnecessary trouble. And it turns out Tony was the person who lured Joshua's brother, Noah, into the delinquent world. They both went to the same high school and were a year junior to Joshua. Joshua turned 34 this year, so they must be 33. Sonia, 3 years younger than Joshua, should be 31. "Joshua, too bad about your brother, huh?" "Tony, I don't care about Noah anymore." "Even you?" Joshua was visibly angry. His brother had passed away due to a fight. Joshua's brother and sister apparently never got along well. Sonia felt neglected in favor of her brother and developed a rivalry, which eventually extended to Joshua as well. Joshua once mentioned how difficult it was to deal with his sister, preferring to dote only on his brother. And like me, Sonia was also a former member of a delinquent group. Unlike her voluntary involvement, Noah was forcibly recruited by Tony. Seeing his siblings' transformation, Joshua probably grew even stronger in his sense of justice. As the three glared at each other, I spoke up from behind Joshua. "Joshua, you need to leave for work soon." "Ah, right." "Running away, Joshua? Remember, I haven't forgotten that you laid hands on me." "That was because you attacked Noah." "All right, both of you, enough. We're done here." With Sonia's words, Joshua left for work, still unresolved. And at the same time, the bell tolling the start of Sonia and her husband's harassment began. An hour after Joshua left for work, the doorbell rang. But when I checked, no one was there. An hour later, there was a loud noise at the entrance, as if something was violently placed there. When I looked, there was a heap of cardboard boxes dumped in front of the door. What's this about? No one was around, so I decided to ignore it and went back inside. Then I heard a small popping sound from the balcony. I hurried over and found 3 broken eggs scattered. We live in an apartment, on the corner, next to the room Sonia just moved into. This means the harassment likely came from Sonia's room, as there are no neighbors on one side and it's too high for someone from below. Angry, I confronted my next-door neighbors. "Hey, is that you? What do you want showing up like this?" Sonia greeted me with an irritable demeanor. "Is this your idea of a prank? Throwing eggs on our balcony?" It had to be Sonia or her husband. The angle only made sense from Sonia's balcony. But Sonia glared at me, replying, "What? Don't be absurd, lady." "Lady? You got proof we did it? Make false accusations and I'll call the cops." Despite being a former gang member, her reliance on the police in such a situation seemed second-rate to me. "I have no proof, but the way the eggs are scattered, they could only come from your balcony." I tried to remain calm, but Sonia kept glaring and arguing back. "Proof? That's weak. Hey, Tony, the lady next door is complaining." Hearing this, Tony joined in. Hey, just because you're Joshua's wife doesn't mean you'll get any special treatment." If Sonia was second-rate, Tony's words were no better. He might think he's intimidating, but to me, it's not frightening at all. I could feel my old self stirring, but I didn't want to revert to my past. So I played the role of a meek, unassuming woman and said quietly, "Please, don't raise your voice." Inwardly, I wanted to deliver a roundhouse kick right then and there, to snap that foolish neck. But having reformed after meeting Joshua, I didn't want to throw away all my efforts for something like this. Seeing my reaction, they both burst into laughter in front of me. "Aha! So, you're Joshua's wife? I thought you'd be something special, but you're just a dull woman. Weak." Tony was giving you too much credit. At the family dinner, you seemed like a real introvert. A kick alone won't suffice. I might need to dislocate a joint or two. Trying to control my rising anger, I was told, "Go on, leave." And the door was closed on me. I stood there, staring at the closed door. I pondered telling Joshua, but knew that even if he spoke to Sonia, they'd just feign ignorance. It would only result in more harassment and frustration for me. So I decided against it. The next day, and the day following, the harassment from Sonia and her husband continued. It always began after Joshua left for work. "Who dumped this garbage at our doorstep? It must be those two." As I was about to leave for work at the supermarket, the door got stuck halfway, blocked by a bag of garbage. I reluctantly took it to the disposal area and then headed to work. 5 hours later, I returned home to find, "This is unbelievable!" There was a cardboard box in front of the door, arranged like a table. On either side of the box, lit candles were placed, and in the center, a vase with flowers was set. On the door above, a photo of me, taken who knows when, was stuck. They were mocking me as if I was deceased. Furious, I was about to kick the cardboard away when Joshua called from behind. "Nancy?" Startled, I turned around to find Joshua, who had come home from work. "You're an hour early." "I got off work early today. What's all this?" Joshua was also surprised at the sight in front of the door. We quickly cleaned up the cardboard and candles from the shared hallway and went inside. There, I told Joshua everything that had happened. "So it's likely Sonia and her husband? But we don't have any proof, so even if we confront them, they'll just deny it." After a moment of thought, Joshua had an idea. "Let's buy cameras. One for the balcony and one for the entrance, especially hidden well at the entrance." I agreed with Joshua's suggestion. There was a limit to how much more we could endure. We immediately purchased cameras online. We had the cameras delivered to Joshua's workplace to avoid suspicion. For now, we'll just have to endure until the cameras arrive. Then we can retaliate with evidence. Understood. So, I bore the harassment from Sonia's house for the next couple of days. For most people, endurance means being unable to fight back due to lack of strength or fear. But for me, it was different. I was holding back the urge to retaliate. In a world where using force was permissible, I would have already verbalized those two. Having the ability but not being able to use it was incredibly frustrating. 3 days later, Joshua came home with the cameras. "Any trouble since?" "The usual. Today, they even threw a fish head onto the balcony." "Let's set up the cameras right away. Put one behind the air conditioning unit on the balcony, aiming at Sonia's balcony. We'll hide another near the fire extinguisher, by the entrance." The day after installing the cameras, Sonia's antics started again as Joshua left for work. I monitored everything through a recording app. Sure enough, the two of them started their antics. I silently observed and left for work when it was time. 2 hours into my shift at the supermarket, Sonia lined up at my register. Well, well, if it isn't my sister-in-law. I silently scanned the items. It was clear from Sonia's tone she knew it was me, her demeanor dripping with condescension. "Aren't you a bit cold for a cashier? Shouldn't you be more hospitable? Come on, give me a discount on this." Other customers were lined up behind Sonia, watching our interaction with concerned expressions. "Hey, I'm not a scarecrow, you know." A middle-aged man in line spoke up to Sonia. "Hey, can't you see she's uncomfortable?" Sonia whirled around, glaring fiercely. "Shut up! It's none of your business." The man seemed completely deflated by Sonia, who suddenly yelled at him. The man shrank back and left the line. I then addressed Sonia for the first time. "Ma'am, if you continue to behave inappropriately, I'll have to call security." I spoke in a calm but icy tone. Perhaps mindful of the others watching, Sonia retorted, "Geez, it's just a joke. Ugh, so disappointing," and left the store, abandoning her items halfway through the transaction. The other customers stared in astonishment. My anger was just about to boil over. When I returned home after work, there was a notice on the door. The note on the door read, "Useless cashier." That's it. I can't take it anymore. I ripped off the note in frustration and waited anxiously for Joshua to return. After Joshua got home, we reviewed the footage from the cameras. It clearly recorded Sonia and her husband's misdeeds. Now we can fight back. "All right, let's go now." Anger filled Joshua's eyes. When we rang Sonia's doorbell, Tony answered. "You two again? What do you want this time?" Sonia appeared behind him. "What do you want, Joshua?" The two of them asked lazily. We finally began our counterattack. "You two!" As I started to speak, Joshua stopped me and stepped forward. Nancy, let me handle this. Sonia and you, Tony. If you harass us any further, it won't end well for you. Joshua's voice was low and menacing. Tony retorted, What? You want to fight? Do you even have proof we did anything? Making baseless accusations like before. Before Tony could finish, Joshua started playing the video saved in the recording app. What? This is our video, capturing your wrongdoings. We had to install cameras because your harassment was too much. This silenced the usually talkative pair. Tony? Sonia, showing a hint of panic, turned to Tony. Tony, frowning deeply, glared back at us. Damn it! You got us this time. The trouble started from your end, remember? I said with a serious face. Tony retorted, So we settle this with force, huh? Wait there, Joshua. I'm calling someone. Call whoever you want. We'll be ready. Joshua stood firm, undeterred. As the situation escalated, Tony desperately pleaded into the phone. William, I need backup, now. His tone was completely different from the bravado he showed us, repeatedly begging for help. After hanging up, he turned back to us. Get ready. William, the most notorious guy around here, is on his way. He smirked at us, convinced of his imminent victory, but relying on someone else's strength showed his true cowardice. Why don't you confront us directly? Keep talking. I know your strength well. I called a special guest this time to ensure you both feel real terror. What a pitiful sight it was. No matter how much they threatened, neither Joshua nor I felt any fear. You must be too scared to even speak. The quiet and meek Nancy, right? Sonia taunted me with a condescending tone. 5 minutes later, the much-bragged-about William arrived. However, he looked surprised when he saw us. William, over here. Long time no see, William. Sonia and Tony were visibly excited, having high expectations of him. But their expectations were quickly shattered. What's going on here? Indeed, long time no see, Will. My calling him Will left Sonia and Tony with puzzled expressions. Joshua also greeted him. It's been a while, Will. The couple looked even more confused by this interaction. Confused, Tony asked, What's this? How do you know William? As Tony spoke with sweat on his forehead, Will looked back and forth between us. I simply said to him, Well, let's not do this, okay? Hearing this, an angry Tony retorted, Don't joke around! William, please, do something! Please! Sonia and Tony were frantic, unable to grasp the situation. But then Will addressed them. Hey, don't tell me you mess with Nancy. His question left the couple momentarily stunned. So what if we did? Tony answered hesitantly. Furious, Will shouted, Idiots! Don't you know who you're messing with? His rebuke left them standing frozen. They clearly had no idea what was going on. Seeing this, I turned to Joshua and said, Hey, Joshua, can I revert to my old self from 15 years ago, just for now? Instead of Joshua, it was Will who turned and responded. Nancy, please, don't. If you do something to them, it might not end up more than just an injury. What? You're giving me orders now, Will? No, I didn't mean it like that. Seeing the special guests they called for help, now humbly apologizing to me, Sonia and Tony were bewildered. What's happening here? Their faces turned pale as Will spoke. Do you two know about BBN? Well, yes, it's famous. It stands for Black Butterfly Nancy, right? The nickname of the former leader of a ladies' group. That's right, and this lady here is Nancy herself. No way. Really? What? Both lost their bravado in an instant. Continuing, Will said, Back then, I led another delinquent group, but we were decimated by Nancy's group. She could take down 30 people, by herself. Sonia and Tony now looked at me fearfully. It made sense. They'd been harassing someone who they thought was inferior, only to find out she was the leader of a ladies group they themselves had once belonged to. I didn't know. Nancy is practically a legend. We joined the group 6 months after you left. As Sonia said, she and Tony had joined the group half a year after I had left. Will had been scouted by me and stayed in the group even after my departure, and looking after Sonia and Tony as their senior. He left the group just before it was decimated by a rival group. By that time, Tony had taken over as the leader, and was the last leader before its downfall. Before you ruined it, it was an invincible group. You can't match Nancy. How could this? Tony was increasingly cornered and distressed by Will. Well, the group that took you down is now the strongest in New York State. But if Nancy was still active, she would still be the strongest. Hearing this, Sonia and Tony collapsed, their spirits broken. Seeing this, Will turned to me and apologized. Please forgive them for my sake. Watching Will apologize, Sonia and Tony had completely lost their will to fight. They never imagined their call for help would backfire this way. All right, but you'll have to settle your dues properly. I glared at the two of them and said, "Ah!" They let out a short scream. For 1 month, you'll clean this apartment and our balcony that you dirtied. If you skip even 1 day, I won't be so forgiving next time. Okay. Sonia, completely intimidated, managed to stutter out her agreement. Tony, unable to speak, just kept nodding frantically. Watching them, Will commented, "No one can really stand up to Nancy." Hearing this, the silent Joshua finally spoke. But I hate delinquents. If Nancy hadn't reformed, I wouldn't be here. Looking down a bit, Joshua said softly, and I peered up at him. Don't worry, I won't show that side of me again. Will burst into laughter at this scene, and we all ended up laughing together. Will and Joshua knew each other because the three of us had met after I left the group. We bumped into Will while on a date and had tea together. Well, now that's settled, why don't you come over for dinner, Will? We three left Sonia and Tony slumped by the entrance and headed to our apartment. Before entering, Joshua added, Sonia, you're my sister, so I'll let this slide just this once, but there won't be a next time. Watching him, I wondered if he too was hiding the same fighting spirit as us. From that day, the harassment from Sonia and her husband completely stopped. As promised, they continued cleaning our balcony and the common areas of the apartment. Though just delinquents doing chores, other residents sometimes looked at them curiously, but that soon stopped. After a month, Sonia and her husband left the apartment without a word. Even Joshua, their blood relative, didn't know where they went. They probably left, feeling awkward about staying in the same place. We had no reason to get involved further, and thought they finally made a wise decision. Finally, we had our peaceful life back. Though neighborhood troubles are common, I never thought I'd be directly involved. At least it was resolved amicably. I have a past I'd rather keep hidden. Joshua has kept it secret all this time. I'm not ashamed of all my past, but I have reflected on my mistakes. I just want to cherish my life with Joshua now. And I hope to live without ever showing my true nature to anyone again. That's all I'm thinking about now.
My daughter Erin, now a college student, has been living on her own for about a year. Despite receiving a reasonable monthly allowance and supposedly working hard at a part-time job, Erin came home looking thin and worn out. Are you overworking yourself? Are you eating enough? I'm eating fine, stuff like cereal, Erin replied. I urged for more, but Erin fell silent. Confirming my uneasy intuition, Erin thanked me. Thank you for the $13 a month, Mom. I couldn't believe my ears. $13? I've been transferring $1,300 every month. My name is Laura. People have always said that I have a poor judgment when it comes to men. My first boyfriend was when I was in college. I dated a man 2 years my senior, but within 3 months of our relationship, I discovered his infidelity. After that, I dated a younger guy, but before I knew it, he had become a freeloader. Probably because I had been paying for everything since he was younger. Then, the man who I thought would be different, the one I married after dating for 4 years, turned out to be both a money waster and cheater. After my divorce from him, I raised Erin as a single mom for 10 years. Erin, who I thought was still young and naive, had grown up to be a reliable daughter who takes the initiative in household chores. Despite me telling her that she doesn't have to push herself so hard, she wouldn't listen, saying, "You're working hard for us, Mom. And you'll collapse if you overdo it, Mom." Erin also never slacked off in her studies. "I want to work hard just like you, Mom. I don't want to burden you," she said, studying her entrance exams to public universities from the moment she entered high school. She may be a bit naive at times, but I believe she's a wonderful daughter. Erin, who studied hard, finally got accepted into a prestigious public university. When we went together to see the acceptance list, we found Erin's applicant number on the bulletin board and we joyfully held hands. The time flew by before she started college. Taking some vacation time, we went on a celebratory hot spring trip, which was truly delightful. While soaking up to my shoulders in the warm water, I found my daughter, her cheeks flushed, saying, "Mom, this is so wonderful." Incredibly endearing. I vowed in my heart that I would protect her no matter what. Then, with the entrance to college, Erin left the nest. With a sense of pride in how well she'd grown up and a touch of loneliness, I saw her off on her journey. Since Erin started living alone, it's become our daily routine to call each other before bedtime. Erin has always been good at house chores and generally more reliable than her peers. I wasn't particularly worried about her living on her own, but the thought of a young woman living alone still left a trace of unease. I wondered if I was being overly protective, but Erin's cheerful conversations every evening brought me relief. Those post-work calls became my moment of relaxation. Erin would talk about all sorts of things. Her college classes, her new friends, the music club she had joined with her friends, and the slightly interesting upperclassmen she met there. Erin's everyday life seemed fulfilling and joyful, which made me happy. Towards the end of the semester, Erin told me with a tense voice, "You know what?" As it turned out, it was the joyful news of, "I recently got a boyfriend." The boy in question was Ian, the slightly interesting senior she met at the club. I replied, "That's great, congratulations," while I felt a slight concern deep down. After all, my daughter, the child of the woman who had been repeatedly told that she had no eye for men, got her first boyfriend. I was worried if my lack of luck with men had been passed down to her. "One day I'd like to introduce him to you. Can I bring him over?" Erin asked, perhaps sensing my anxiety. I put on a cheerful voice and replied, "Of course." When the summer vacation started, Erin came home and brought Ian along. Upon meeting him, I found that Ian was a clean-cut, fine young man. "Nice to meet you. I'm Ian. I'm dating your daughter." Ian greeted me crisply and shook my hand as soon as I answered the door. It seemed he was a responsible young man. I felt relieved that my worry was unfounded. Ian had no tattoos or piercings, but had a sophisticated aura about him. His cuff sleeves gave him a sensual appeal. It reminded me of my youth when I was attracted to such people. I felt a strange sense of nostalgia. We then had iced tea together, and I found that Ian was not only responsible, but also very thoughtful. He offered to carry the iced tea that I had made and subtly refilled my empty cup when it ran out. Well, Ian is quite a decent guy. Taking advantage of Ian leaving the table for a moment, I whispered quietly to Erin, "What was all that about, Mom? Were you worried?" Erin chuckled a bit shyly. "Of course, dear. After all, my daughter is in love." "Oh, I told you, I'm fine, Mom. I have better luck than you." Laughing along, I agreed. That's true. Soon the second semester started. Erin, not wanting to burden me, began working multiple jobs to support herself. I had been sending her money every month for emergencies, but she seemed to be saving it all, wanting to save for the future. Apparently trusted by her employers, Erin was always busy with school and work, and lately didn't have much time for her club activities. "Are you sure you're okay? Don't overdo it and use the money I send. Do you want me to come and help with chores?" When I asked worriedly, Erin answered with a faint voice, "I'm fine. Ever since I haven't been able to go to the club, Ian has been coming over a lot because he's worried. You have your own worries, right? I can handle things myself. Really, I'm fine." "Is that so? Well, if you're sure." Even the other day when I got back from work, Ian had made a surprise hamburger. It was really delicious. I have Ian, so I'm okay. Her bright voice gave away how much she really liked Ian. Before long, Erin ended the call saying, "I have an early class tomorrow, so I'm going to hang up." Even though I was still worried, I reminded myself that Erin has Ian. She kept calling to update me on her situation, but as she got busier, the frequency of her calls gradually decreased. From the occasional conversation, it seemed that she was leading a busy life with working classes. However, I was concerned that she didn't seem to be living well. On the days Ian visited, he made sure she ate properly, but on other days I heard she was mostly eating cereal. It was clear that she was struggling, but I've been sending her more than enough money and I don't think Erin is the type to be wasteful. When I told my mother about it, she dismissed my concern, saying, "You're worrying too much about your grown daughter. You can't let go of your child." Perhaps I was worrying too much. Erin will be 19 soon. To me, she's still a child, but in the eyes of the world, she's already an adult. And she has the dependable Ian by her side. Until she really struggles and cries for help, maybe I should just let things be, I thought, trying to calm my restless heart. In the midst of it all, winter break had arrived. Erin, who had returned home again, was visibly thinner. She was always a slender girl, but her cheeks had sunken, and her torso was clearly thinner. Dark circles were under her eyes. She told me that she had been working late the previous night and had come home straight after. "Erin, aren't you pushing yourself too hard lately? Are you eating properly?" I asked. "I'm eating properly, cereal and stuff." "And stuff?" Erin fell silent. To my stunned silence, she quickly covered up by saying, "But I've become good at cereal." Her earnest smile instead looked painfully strained. Could it be that she isn't eating properly? I've been sending her allowance and she has been working hard, so why? Feeling puzzled, I felt an unpleasant premonition creeping up. As if to confirm my suspicions, Erin said, "Thanks for the $13 every month, Mom." 13. I said you $1,300 every month. And now it was Erin's turn to be shocked. An ominous feeling was growing inside me. "Erin, where do you keep your checkbook and debit card?" "In my desk drawer at home." "Erin, I'm going to your place now. There's something I want to check." Erin was taken back by my sudden words, but she nodded obediently. On the train to Erin's apartment, we talked about various things. The first topic was, why did you think the allowance was only $13? Erin had a living expenses account, where she deposited her part-time job money, and a savings account where I deposited her allowance. She had to spend a lot of money on textbooks and such at the start of the new semester. When she recently checked her savings account, the balance was $78. Erin felt that the account balance was low, but she had not touched the account for the past 6 months. Erin knew I was sending her money every month, but she never asked for the exact amount. She assumed that the $78 in her account was the total of my financial support for the past 6 months. That comes to about $13 a month. "Didn't you think that was low?" I asked. "I thought it was, but I figured you were struggling too, Mom." "Honestly, you're such a silly girl. How much money do you think I earn? Don't underestimate me." At my semi-joking remark, Erin seemed to finally relax a bit, but her face clouded over again almost immediately. No wonder. If Erin hadn't touched any of the money I sent her, it meant that someone was draining her bank account, and the most suspicious person was Ian, who was frequently at her apartment. Erin seemed to be in denial. I didn't want to believe it either, that this seemingly nice young man, Erin's boyfriend, would steal money. I anxiously waited for the train to arrive at the nearest station. Upon arriving at Erin's home, we grabbed her checkbook and headed straight to the ATM at the bank. The bank would close in the evening, and it was already late in the afternoon. We were cutting it close. We slid the checkbook into the ATM and waited for it to be updated. When we saw the balance printed on the checkbook, we were both shocked. The money, a consistent $1,300, had indeed been deposited into her account every month. However, there was evidence of frequent withdrawals. Erin turned pale and muttered softly, "Why?" Seeing her on the verge of collapsing, I took her to a nearby coffee shop where I decided to probe deeper into the matter. Primarily, I wanted to know about her management of the checkbook. Erin kept her checkbook and debit card in a locked drawer in her desk. However, the key was kept in another drawer, so anyone who entered the apartment could potentially unlock it. The only person who could be rummaging through her room when she's not around was her boyfriend, Ian, who had a spare key. Moreover, the pin for the debit card was the same as the one she usually used for her other cards. Someone must have peeked when she was withdrawing money. I admit it was careless of me as well when I set up the account. "I'm sorry, honey. Mom should have been more thoughtful too. I never imagined someone else would use the money." "It's not your fault, Mom. I should have been more vigilant about managing it." While both of us were hanging our heads, I added, "But the person who is most to blame is the one who spent other people's money without permission." "Yeah, you're right." Erin's response was devoid of energy. That was understandable. She had been betrayed in such a way by the person she most likely trusted the most. Seeing my daughter so dispirited, my heart ached. "I'll take care of this," I found myself saying. "What? You may not want to make a big deal out of this, but it is a serious crime. We should gather solid evidence and take it to the police." "The police?" Erin's voice trembled, clearly disturbed. "Yes, it's that serious, but don't worry, I'll handle the rest. It's all to ensure that you can have a peaceful college life, okay?" Erin nodded hesitantly. A few days later, I visited a private detective agency that had helped me out when my husband was suspected of cheating. "I need you to investigate my daughter's boyfriend. His name is Ian Mack. He's a sophomore in economics at the same university as my daughter. We suspect that he might have been using the money I sent to my daughter without permission." I explained, showing a picture of Ian that Erin had sent me on my phone. They agreed to take on the case without hesitation. Their fees were hefty, but it was all to clear up this matter for Erin's sake. While we waited for the investigation, Erin decided to commute to college from my house due to her anxiety. The one-way commute took over an hour, which was tough for Erin, but she visibly relaxed every time I came home. One evening, she made granola for dinner. "Just as you said, you've become good at making cereal." Seeing the confident wink Erin gave me, I felt a pang of heartache, knowing that she must have been eating this almost daily. A month later, the result of the investigation came in. There was no doubt that Ian had been withdrawing money from Erin's account. According to the investigator, soon after Ian started dating Erin, his friends testified that his lifestyle suddenly improved. What surprised me more was that Ian's crimes didn't end there. Apparently, Ian was in relationships with several other women. Stunned, I was handed a few photographs. Photos of Ian with his arm around a woman. Photos of him dining happily at a restaurant. Pictures of them looking into an arcade together. Photos of them strolling through the hotel district. In every photo, the same man with a distinctive beauty mark was seen with a different woman. A characteristic teardrop on a man's face. There was no mistake, it was Ian. "It appears that Ian has been using the money you've been sending to your daughter, not just to impress his friends, but also to maintain relationships with several girlfriends," the investigator told me, looking quite grim. "Thank you," I said, bowing my head deeply. Now it was time to strike back. First, I filed a complaint with the police. Then, I sent a written explanation of what Ian had done to his parents, the university he attended, and all of his girlfriends. At first, Ian denied everything, but finally admitted to his wrongdoing when confronted by multiple girlfriends. Naturally, all of the girlfriends, including Erin, cut ties with Ian. Subsequently, due to the police case, Ian was expelled from the university and brought back to his parents' home. Fortunately, his parents were reasonable people and came to my house with a humble gift to apologize. For the time being, his parents agreed to reimburse the stolen money. "I'll make our stupid son repay this, even if it kills him," Ian's father swore, even going so far as to almost cry. According to what Erin heard through the grapevine, Ian is now working multiple jobs to continue repaying his parents. By the time this incident settled, it was the beginning of spring. Just as Erin's spring break started, we decided to celebrate the end of this unfortunate relationship with our first trip to a hot spring resort in over a year. Erin had managed to get her life back on track since then, and her complexion and physique were returning to a healthy state. We soaked in the warm bath, ate plenty of delicious food from the inn, and watched TV. I felt like we were finally able to enjoy some peace for the first time in a while. "Mom?" Just before falling asleep, Erin spoke up within the covers. "What's up? Remember how you and Dad divorced because of Dad's reckless spending and affairs, right?" Hearing Erin's words, I was taken aback. My ex-husband, just like Ian, was a man who spent money lavishly in order to maintain a good face around others. Unable to cover the living expenses due to his spending and, moreover, having affairs, I slammed the divorce papers at my ex-husband. We ended up choosing similar kinds of men, didn't we? Erin gave a slightly sad smile. "That's true, we need to be careful from now on." Feeling a little jittery, she responded with an intentionally cheerful tone. "Speaking of which, you seem to have been looking happier lately. Did you get a boyfriend?" "No way, it's not a boyfriend." "Could he possibly become a boyfriend?" Recently, due to the incident, I've been getting along with the investigator, but I hadn't told Erin about it yet. Even so, did she sense something? Or was it just because we were mother and daughter who had lived together for so long? "Wait a minute, are you sure it's going to be alright this time, Mom?" Erin teased me with a chuckle. "Well, it should be okay, right? Unlike your father, he seems to be a serious and reliable person." "Come on, be serious. If it's after me, it's your turn, Mom, and that's not going to be a laughing matter." I'll be careful." After responding in a serious tone, Aaron and I couldn't help but look at each other and laugh.
Pregnant women prioritizing their own health isn't an act of selfishness. They're simply trying to protect the baby growing inside of them. So it doesn't matter what others whisper behind their backs. Harassment and negative comments don't matter at all, because it's all about protecting that precious baby. Every day, both my baby and I face life with that conviction. A mother-in-law who endangers 2 innocent lives, I will never forgive her. I'm currently 9 months pregnant. My belly sticks out so much that it's hard to even see my feet. This is my first pregnancy, and next month I'll be giving birth. My emotions, probably due to hormone fluctuations, are like a roller coaster. But my husband has been my rock throughout, supporting me wholeheartedly. On his days off, he'd take over all household chores just to let me rest. Potassium is good for swelling. That's why I made a cucumber and chicken salad for you. He does so much for me and our baby. I'm incredibly grateful for him. However, there was one person who tried to get in our way. She's getting too spoiled, isn't she? The one casting a sharp gaze, specifically at me, was our live-in mother-in-law. Living with her was not our choice, but a result of her cunning plan. Just a few years ago, mother-in-law lived with father-in-law in a single-family home. After father-in-law passed away, she felt the house was too big and decided to move to public housing. Getting a place in public housing requires waiting for your turn, and it's highly competitive. But surprisingly, mother-in-law's turn came around quickly, and she joyfully shared the news with my husband. To help her pack, my husband and I spent every weekend at her house. But mother-in-law barely lifted a finger, just giving orders. I found myself not just making her lunch, but also preparing her dinner every day. Your stew is quite overcooked. You should study cooking more. Ignoring my efforts, mother-in-law constantly criticizes me. It's frustrating, especially when it feels like we're constantly in a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict, even though we haven't been married long. My husband often tries to mediate, but every time he does, mother-in-law gets sulky. So I'm the bad guy now, huh? She'd pout and turn away like a child. Feeling bad for my husband stuck in the middle, I would apologize to mother-in-law, just to smooth things over. Amid all this, on moving day, a shock awaited us. A ton of mother-in-law's belongings arrived at our house. Wait, why are they here? As we looked on in confusion, mother-in-law showed up later in a taxi. She began instructing the movers efficiently. My husband asked, "What's going on?" "Isn't it obvious? I've moved in," she responded. Turns out mother-in-law never actually applied for public housing. From the start, she had planned to live with us and just had us help her pack as a ruse. Room by room, her stuff began filling spaces we had planned for our future children. She seemed irritated by our displeasure and made snide comments loud enough for the movers to hear. "I get it. I'm an inconvenience. But do you think I can live alone at this age? The thought of something happening terrifies me." She played up her vulnerability, her eyes glistening with staged tears. The performance was almost admirable. The movers looked our way, equally bewildered. "I know it's your love nest. Having an old woman like me around is a nuisance, isn't it?" Her tone was almost sarcastic. "It's not like that." It seems my husband has a soft spot for his mother's tears. "Well then, here I am. Let's get along," she smirked. Thus began our imposed cohabitation. Despite available units in the nearest public housing, my husband searched for apartments for her, but mother-in-law was unyielding. "I want a place built within the last 5 years. I live on a pension. I can't afford rent, but if you're willing to cover it, I might consider. She continued being unreasonable, and her stay extended. As time went on, mother-in-law increasingly intruded into our personal lives, and a year passed. Being the daughter-in-law, I felt unable to voice my concerns. Eventually, even my husband began to see her constant presence as the new normal. With mother-in-law always watching, I found no place in the house where I could truly relax. Soon after, I discovered I was pregnant. Both my husband and mother-in-law were overjoyed. The same mother-in-law who had treated me poorly seemed eager to help me for the sake of her future grandchild. But when she found out the baby was a girl, her attitude shifted. "Why isn't it a boy? You really are a disappointment." She reverted to her mean-spirited self. Even when I felt dizzy from anemia or had to lay down because of contractions, mother-in-law would expect me to do household chores without hesitation. My husband was the only one who would stand up for me against mother-in-law. But lately, he's been swamped with work and often returns home after 10 p.m. During times when I felt physically exhausted, I wanted to avoid worrying about household issues. I decided to steadfastly bear the current situation. I resolved to endure it until the birth of our child. But there's a limit to how much one can tolerate. It might be best to take some action. After some thought, I learned one day that an old friend of mother-in-law's was coming to visit. "She's in town for a relative's wedding, so I expect you to host her properly," mother-in-law announced. It was the next day. While mother-in-law's abrupt plans weren't new to me, I wasn't fazed. We'd order pizza for the day, and my husband diligently cleaned the living area. All was set for the visit, but then came an unexpected downpour. Rain lashed the windows relentlessly. While observing the storm outside, mother-in-law had an outrageous request. "Given this rain, my friend might be stranded at the airport. Could you pick her up?" "What?" Regret instantly followed my startled reply. Mother-in-law's displeased expression said it all. "You can still drive even if you're pregnant, right? Go now." "I can't in this weather," I replied. Honestly, my belly at 9 months pregnant felt like it was about to burst. Driving was uncomfortable and risky, especially in this weather. The mere thought of an accident due to these conditions was terrifying. I told mother-in-law straightforwardly about my concerns, my desire to prioritize the baby, and my need for rest. But mother-in-law remained unmoved. "You're just being lazy. When I was pregnant, I did everything my mother-in-law asked," she argued. "But what if I get into an accident in this heavy rain?" I protested. "You're being careless. Just go get her now." "Mother-in-law, I really can't. I'm sorry." "You're back-talking your mother-in-law. I'm so unlucky to have a daughter-in-law like you." Furious, mother-in-law's face turned red. For some reason, she grabbed my arm, opened the front door, and forcibly pushed me out into the pouring rain. Stunned by the heavy rain hitting my skin, mother-in-law tossed the car keys at my feet. "Go already. My friend is still stranded at the airport because of you." I urgently pleaded for our unborn baby's sake. "She can take a taxi or bus. There are other options. Just go." As mother-in-law tried to shut the door, I desperately tried to prevent her. We struggled at the entrance. Drenched from the rain, which isn't good for a pregnant woman, mother-in-law stubbornly refused to let me back in. Then someone behind me reached for the door. "What's going on? Mom, let her in now." My husband had come home early. Apparently, due to the bad weather, there was no overtime, so he left work on time. He looked bewildered by the situation. Finally inside, he quickly dried me off with a towel. Seeing this, mother-in-law's mood worsened. "Why do you always take her side? I'm your mother. This is so cruel. How can you be so heartless, making a pregnant woman stand out in this heavy rain? What happened? Mother-in-law, who was earlier crying, suddenly shot back. I didn't do anything wrong. I just asked you to pick up my friend by car. With exaggerated tears, the mother-in-law started crying, and my husband let out a heavy sigh. He probably realized there was no reasoning with her. My husband then asked me what had transpired. I recounted everything mother-in-law did and said to me. However, the previously tearful mother-in-law instantly rebutted with an angry look. She's lying. She's trying to paint me as the bad guy and drive me out. She screamed hysterically, cutting me off before I could speak further. My husband tried his best to calm the frenzied mother-in-law, but the situation wasn't improving. In fact, it was deteriorating. You've been brainwashed by her. You used to be such a kind, mother-loving boy. As mother-in-law began crying again, to our surprise, the doorbell rang. When we opened it, mother-in-law's friend was there. Apparently, she had taken a taxi from the airport and safely arrived. Sensing the palpable tension in the room, she inquired, "Did something happen?" Without missing a beat, mother-in-law started bad-mouthing me. "I'm sorry, I made you take a taxi. I wanted her to pick you up, but she refused because she's pregnant. Today's young daughter-in-laws are just too spoiled, aren't they?" Mother-in-law sought agreement from her friend, but her reaction was unexpected. "You tried to send a pregnant woman out in the storm? That's unbelievably cruel." Mother-in-law's forced smile faltered. Her friend didn't stop there, growing even more critical. "You've always been arrogant towards those weaker than you, and fawning over those above you. You haven't changed a bit. Actually, you've gotten worse." Mother-in-law started to panic as unexpected revelations from her past spilled out. "Also, I bet you only invited me here to show off your happy living situation with your son and daughter-in-law, right? It's so transparent." I didn't. I had my doubts about you living harmoniously with the daughter-in-law, but I didn't think you'd be this horrible to her." The friend's straightforward comments left mother-in-law unable to retort. I was genuinely surprised seeing her rendered speechless by both her son and her own friend. With the growing icy stares from everyone, mother-in-law was visibly flustered. Perhaps, in an attempt to deflect, she pointed at me and exclaimed, "If she had spoken to me more gently, I wouldn't have forced her to go out. But she's always defiant. No wonder I get angry." The truth is, I had only stood up to her this one time. Her incessant denial of wrongdoing only fueled my anger. The tipping point was when she jeopardized the safety of my unborn child. I decided to play my trump card. "I've recorded all the derogatory remarks and verbal abuse you've directed at me." I confidently displayed my mobile phone. Ever since we began living with mother-in-law, I had been recording her harassment as evidence. Even if mother-in-law and I didn't get along, she was still the only mother my husband had. I really didn't want to expose such an important person in my husband's life. But after everything she put me through, I couldn't remain silent. To start, I played our recent rain-soaked altercation at high volume. The color drained from my mother-in-law's face. Her friend, seemingly expecting such behavior, sighed in exasperation. My husband's face darkened quickly. "Mom, how could you do this to my wife?" His anger was palpable, his voice deeply stern. With the evidence laid bare, mother-in-law could only slump to the floor without any excuses. Her friend quickly got into the waiting taxi outside. I rushed to thank her. "Thank you so much." Don't mention it. This has cleared up some long-standing grievances of mine. She's always been this way, but I'm relieved to see your husband turned out all right. Have a healthy baby, okay?" Back of the doorway stood a slumped mother-in-law and a towering, displeased husband. "Would you prefer a care facility or an apartment to live alone?" It seemed my husband had decided to end our living arrangement with mother-in-law, presenting her with two choices. "I'm truly sorry. I'll make up for it for the rest of my life. Please don't abandon me." Despite mother-in-law's pleas, my husband's stance was unyielding. He told her to decide by the next day and then withdrew to our room. I didn't speak to mother-in-law and quickly began preparing dinner. Even when it was time for dinner, mother-in-law remained motionless in her spot. The friend who had come to our aid had attended our wedding. While at our table, she whispered, offering her support for any future troubles with mother-in-law. I remembered this gesture and had called her, seeking a witness to the torment. That's why she had visited, using a relative's wedding as an excuse. Mother-in-law initially resisted both the idea of living alone and moving into a care facility, but my husband made the final decision to place her in care. Thankfully, she had sufficient funds from father-in-law's inheritance and her savings. We became estranged from her. Every month, I received lengthy apology letters from mother-in-law, but they barely addressed the apology, mostly filled with complaints about her care facility. Feeling constantly watched, feeling she wasn't that old to need such care, I had no intention to act on her grumblings. My husband began to refuse her letters, and we lost contact entirely. On my due date, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Now, without mother-in-law around, we're tirelessly raising our child. This is what marital bliss looks like. Every day, I exchange smiles with my husband. We hope to live peacefully, just the three of us, for years to come.
My name is Mariah. I'm turning 45 this summer. I live with my 92-year-old granny. Granny is both physically and mentally in great shape, living each day peacefully. I owe so much to her and my late granddad. They're the ones who raised me after all, but something happened that exploited my gratitude, and it was like a nightmare. Today, I want to share that story with you. I have an older sister named Christine, who's 3 years older than me. Christine is brilliant and skilled at everything she does. My parents had high hopes for her, enrolling her in all sorts of activities with enthusiasm. In contrast, I was always shy and never talented. My parents were noticeably distant with me. I still remember the time my parents and Christine started to act as if I didn't exist. Eventually, Christine got accepted into one of the top middle schools in the country. Due to the commute, the whole family decided to move, except they didn't take me with them. Instead, they left me with my grandparents, Granddad and Granny, who lived in the countryside. By that time, I was already used to how my family treated me. I was more relieved to be away from my family than sad. My grandparents welcomed me warmly into their home. I made good friends at school and enjoyed every day. After high school, without any specific goals, I decided to move to the city and find a job. I got a part-time job at a clothing store, where I had good coworkers and enjoyed my work. Soon enough, I was put in charge of managing a store. In the midst of all this, I lost touch with Granddad and Granny due to my busy life. One day, out of the blue, my cell phone rang, showing a number I didn't recognize. I answered, and even though the voice was raspy, there was no doubt it was my mom's voice. Let me tell you, joy was the last thing on my mind. Mom's words were empty, as she steered the conversation here and there. It was all fluff, with her obviously just trying to gauge my mood. Eager to end the chat, I mumbled some responses and hung up. Then, another call came in from yet another unknown number. This time it was Christine. Apparently, she still lived with my parents. She was fuming about me hanging up with Mom and starting laying into me. I had enough, so I hung up. And then, Granddad fainted. I couldn't believe my ears. Cutting Christine's rant short, I insisted she spill the details. Turned out, my granddad had fallen while working in the garden and was now in the hospital. Granny was with him, so nobody was at their home. I made up an excuse, ended the call, and tried to reach my grandparents' home. I couldn't trust a word from the family that abandoned me, but no one picked up. I had no choice but to believe them right now. I called Christine back, and it was clear she was still miffed. I didn't mention the fact that I called my grandparents. Instead, I asked where Granddad was hospitalized. Christine murmured something but didn't give me a straight answer. Instead, she said, "Granddad's medical bills are through the roof. Can you send us some money?" What happened to him? No matter how many times I asked about Granddad, Christine only talked about money. "We're the ones taking care of him. You, Mariah, haven't done anything, so you should at least contribute financially," she shouted. I'm livid, but she wasn't wrong. In the end, I promised to send them money. "You're a manager, aren't you? You can send at least $1,000, right?" Those were my dad's words. After all this time, the first conversation with me was about money. I was overwhelmed with loneliness and frustration and couldn't say a word. "We're going through a lot too, so remember that." With that piercing remark, my mom hung up. Why couldn't she just say she was sorry? Unable to control my emotions any longer, I ended the call. From then on, I started sending $1,000 each month to my family. Being a manager didn't mean I was rolling in money. Still, for the sake of my dear granddad, I worked hard to make ends meet. My salary wasn't enough, so I took up a night job. After closing my clothing store, I would rush to my part-time job. I worked in a warehouse, picking orders until the early morning, then I'd go home. I would manage a quick nap of about 2 hours, take a shower, and dash out the door. Day after day, I worked almost around the clock. I would inevitably fall ill sometimes from pushing myself too hard, but it wasn't something I could share with anyone. I convinced myself it was my burden to bear, and I shouldered it alone. I gritted my teeth and worked like crazy just to send money home. Whenever I had a spare moment, I'd call my family to check on Granddad's health. Apparently, his condition wasn't stable. Sometimes he was fine, other times he was bedridden. They still wouldn't tell me which hospital he was in. Even if I knew, I couldn't afford to go there. In the end, there was very little I could do. Then, one day after living like this, I collapsed from overwork. I blacked out at the clothing shop where I worked, and the next thing I knew, I was lying in a hospital bed. I had been unconscious for about a week. When I woke up, a young nurse looked at me with a complicated expression. When I asked why, she awkwardly looked away. The nurse had immediately contacted my family after I was admitted, but no one came to see me. The nurse seemed to pity my situation. To me, it was normal, but I guess it's unthinkable for most people. Once I felt a bit better, I was allowed to use my cell phone. When the nurse handed it to me, it was turned off. When I asked her why, she said it had died because of the numerous incoming calls. Confused, I borrowed a charger and powered up my phone. There were over 100 missed calls, all from Christine. Startled by what I'd never seen before, I called Christine back, and then, "Where's the money?" From the get-go, Christine raised her voice in anger. Christine was furious because I hadn't sent this month's money. While I was in the hospital, the day I usually would send money had passed. I immediately apologized and explained my situation. Then she snapped. "I know you're in the hospital, but you can still send money." I felt a chill run down my spine. The nurse must have told her about my condition. Christine was demanding money, fully aware of my situation. What a terrible family. I just agreed on a new date for the transfer and hung up. 4 years after I started sending money, my beloved granddad passed away. Or rather, he had already passed away. I found out about Granddad's passing through a phone call from a friend who lives in my hometown. Apparently, they found it strange that I hadn't attended the funeral and decided to give me a call. Yes, I had been kept completely in the dark about Granddad's condition. I learned about it a month after the funeral had already taken place. During that time, I was still sending money. Struggling to come to terms with my feelings, I called Christine. "I've been busy with my wedding, so I couldn't get in touch." Really? That's her excuse? I wanted to lash out at Christine right then and there, but I felt all the strength drain from my body, and I collapsed onto the floor. Half of me was devastated by Christine's attitude. The other half felt relieved that the money transfer was over. I no longer wanted to talk to Christine and was about to hang up the phone. That's when she casually said, "By the way, Grandma fainted." At this point, my anger exploded. "Stop lying!" Before I knew it, I was shouting. Then Christine retorted, "If you say it's a lie, go ahead and stop sending money. What do you think will happen to Grandma if you stop sending money?" It was almost like blackmail, but if Granny really had collapsed, what could I say? "Tell me which hospital she's in." "All visits are suspended. No one can see her right now," she responded. I couldn't trust Christine's words, but I also had no definitive proof that she was lying. "You, a high school dropout, should just keep sending money and keep quiet." Laughing, Christine ended the call. From then on, no one in the family would pick up my calls. But on the scheduled remittance day, Christine always called to say, "Send the money quickly." Before I realized it, 20 years had passed since I started sending money. I am now over 40, completely missing my marriageable years. For 2 decades, my life had been nothing but earning money. I've collapsed multiple times, forced myself back up, and sprinted through days in a daze. All the sacrifices were because I wanted Granny to get well. But I've hit my limit. That day, I took a break from my night shift. Returning home from the shop, I crumpled onto the living room floor. Just when I thought I'd drift into deep sleep, the doorbell rang. I felt like staying in bed, drained from exhaustion. But I couldn't inconvenience the delivery person. Dragging my weary body, I managed to get to the front door to receive the package. I locked the front door and then found myself collapsing in the entranceway. How long was I out? I woke up lying there in the entryway. A package had fallen in front of me. Who could it be from? The moment I glanced at the label, I sprang to my feet in surprise. There it was, Granny's name, but she was supposed to be in the hospital. Upon closer inspection, the package was shipped from Switzerland, and right beside Granny's name was a phone number. Desperate, I grabbed my cell phone. "Hey, Mariah, how are you?" The voice on the other end was one I hadn't heard in over 20 years, a comforting one. "Granny, are you okay?" "I've been fine all along. What's wrong?" There was no trace of illness in Granny's voice. I spilled the last 20 years to Granny. What I learned shocked me. It was true that Granddad had fallen ill, been hospitalized, and passed away, but since they were already wealthy, there were no concerns about hospital bills. My family never sent them a dime. Granny told me more about my family as I listened in disbelief. Christine, who was treated as a golden child, failed to secure a job after graduating college. Since then, she bounced from part-time job to part-time job, supported by my parents. They'd spoiled her so much, they couldn't even control her anymore. They now had their eyes set on Granddad's inheritance. Sensing this, Granddad transferred all his assets to Granny while he was still alive. After Granddad passed, Granny moved to Switzerland to visit some friends. It was to prevent a family feud over the inheritance. I had been swindled by my family for 20 years. Upon hearing my story, Granny was furious on my behalf. She promised she would help me. A few days later, I got a call from Christine. "Hey, where's the money?" Christine's tone was as aggressive as ever. but I calmly asked her back, "What did you do with my money?" Christine was obviously shaken. "We're using it for Grandma." "How, exactly?" "Stop pestering me. What's with all these questions all of a sudden?" Sensing something, Christine handed the phone to Dad. "Mariah, you shouldn't upset Christine." "All I want to know is what happened to my money." Talking about money, I could tell Dad was also trying to hide something. His voice gave it away. "Don't worry about it. Acting all high and mighty with your $1,000, you high school grad." "So, should I stop sending you money?" As I said that, Dad suddenly started to panic. You could tell just by his reaction. Christine quickly took the phone back. "Stop sending us money? Are you kidding?" "I'm not kidding." "You don't care what happens to Grandma?" "Yeah." My response must have shocked her, because Christine's voice was trembling. Go ahead, stop sending money if you dare." "All right, will do." I cut her off and hung up. Christine continued to call me, but I never picked up. Half a year passed with this back and forth. It was a calm day. When I opened the window, a slightly chilly breeze came in. It felt like the beginning of fall. I stopped answering my family's calls, so now they're trying to reach out to me through social media and text messages. They seem desperate to get in touch. The messages were the same from everyone, so I reluctantly called. "Hey, what have you been doing all this time?" Christine was shouting, just as I had expected. "It's hard to take care of Grandma without your financial support." "Whoa, that sounds tough." "What's with that attitude?" When I sarcastically responded, Christine exploded even more. "We had to take a $30,000 loan because of you." "That's unfortunate." "You're the guarantor, so make sure you pay." Christine seemed a bit more relaxed, but her threats didn't work on me anymore. "That's fraud, isn't it?" "No one knows who signed it." "I'm not even in America now, you know." "Well, what?" Christine lost it on the other side of the phone. "If you don't provide the money, that's going to affect Grandma."
"Affect who?"
Granny, who had been listening to the conversation on speaker, joined in. You could hear the silence on the other end.
"You three have done something awful to Mariah, haven't you?"
No, it's not like that." Christine defensively responded, her voice strained. In the background, my parents were screaming.
"You'll be paying back the $30,000.
Granny said, and then hung up the phone. The day after reconnecting with Granny for the first time in 20 years, I was busy preparing to move to Switzerland, breaking off ties with my family and living just with Granny. That was Granny's idea. Retirement paperwork went smoother than expected, and within 2 months, I was on my way to Switzerland. Sometime later, I heard from my relatives. Apparently, my parents reached out asking to borrow money. Turns out, Christine had squandered all the money I'd been sending. But that wasn't all. In addition to the $30,000, Christine had racked up more debts without telling our parents. Now they're struggling to pay it back, and the situation seems pretty bleak. However, that's no longer any of my business. Despite the very challenging years, now I live with my beloved Granny. I'm incredibly happy now, and we spend our days filled with laughter.
My name is Olivia Johnson, and I'm 36 years old. I have a husband who is 3 years older than me and a son in elementary school. 5 years ago, my husband had an accident that left him paralyzed from the waist down. My husband, who was once the best salesman in his department, had no choice but to quit his job. For him, losing his job was the hardest thing to accept. To escape from reality, my husband started lashing out at my son and me over trivial things. We had days where he would snap back to reality only after seeing our son cry. Once I got the hang of dealing with my husband and told my son to avoid his dad as much as possible when I wasn't around, the outbursts decreased. That's when I started working full-time. Even so, it was impossible for me, just starting a new job, to earn as much as my husband used to. So I started to take up extra shifts to increase our income a bit. While it left me no time to rest, I worked relentlessly, thinking it was for the sake of my family. Perhaps because of that, I failed to notice the changes in myself. I only realized it when a friend from high school, whom I hadn't seen in a long time, pointed it out. Looking at me, she said, "You've changed a lot." I could tell from her expression that it wasn't meant as a compliment. We've always been honest with each other. Even so, she seemed at a loss for words. I was curious, so I asked her, "Have I changed that much? Don't worry, I won't get mad. Just tell me honestly." Upon hearing my request, she spoke without hesitation. "Okay, if you say so. You've changed so much. It's like you're a different person. You look extremely tired, and your plain style and makeup are something the old Olivia would never wear. You look like you've aged by at least 10 years. Even though I'd asked for honesty, her words hit me pretty hard. But I couldn't deny it. I'm definitely not the person I used to be. When I was in my 20s, I was always checking out the latest fashion and makeup trends. Now I focus only on choosing functional, safe colors and don't even keep up with the latest trends. However, even after realizing this, I just don't have the luxury to enjoy fashion as I used to. Though I felt somewhat pessimistic, I reminded myself, this is only for now. In a few weeks, our multi-generational home will be completed. The plan is for my family and my in-laws to live there. My in-laws suggested this to help lighten my load a bit. I felt bad, but I took them up on their offer. My husband was all for it too. Ever since we decided on the multi-generational home, my husband's been in high spirits. He, who is usually quiet and hard to read, has been starting conversations with me and our son more often lately. Our son, not used to his dad talking to him, seems confused but also a bit happy. At one point, my husband would yell at our son for unreasonable reasons. Because of that, our son became overly sensitive to his dad's mood. I had been struggling to find a way to improve the relationship between my son and my husband, hoping that living in a duplex might be a good start. But when our long-awaited duplex was finally completed, my husband told me that he had something to discuss. He mentioned that my mother-in-law would also be present, and I had a bad feeling about this. Despite my apprehension, my husband began to speak with a smile on his face. "I can finally tell you, Olivia. I was advised to keep silent until the duplex was finished, but I've been looking forward to this day." I was puzzled, not quite grasping what he was trying to convey. Then, with a casual tone, as if he were talking about today's weather, he said, "Olivia, let's get a divorce, and from now on, let's lead separate lives." It took me a few minutes to comprehend my husband's words. However, it seemed he took my silence as an agreement and triumphantly spread a divorce paper on the table. The document looked legitimate, with signatures from both him and my in-laws. Unable to accept the reality, I looked up, thinking it might be some kind of distasteful prank. But my husband's expression instantly crumbled that thought. I felt a determined resolve in his eyes, a promise to absolutely divorce me. I instinctively turned to my mother-in-law for support, but with an unreadable expression, she simply said, "Sign the paper." I felt betrayed. I thought things were going well with both my husband and my mother-in-law, but perhaps it was only me. Tears welled up as I bit my lower lip and looked down. Meanwhile, my husband continued to speak. "You can take our son, Olivia. He would be happier. Besides, with my health condition, it's impossible for me to take care of him." I cut him off. "Hold on. I never agreed on getting a divorce. You never said anything about this. You can't just decide all this on your own." I voiced my displeasure during the brief silence. "First off, what do you plan to do without me? Do you realize how much I've supported you?" As soon as my husband heard these words, his expression changed. His face turned red and he glared at me, yelling, "That's what I can't stand about you. Your self-righteous way of talking. I didn't choose to be like this, yet you always look worn out, acting as if you're the only one suffering. I felt blamed every time. I'm fed up with you and your victim complex." I lost my words hearing the true feelings of my husband. I couldn't hold back my tears anymore. Seeing me crying, my husband looked annoyed and said, "See, You always play the victim, right, Mom? You'd agree that a wife like her who can't even respect her husband isn't suitable for me, right? Don't worry, my new partner is young and beautiful, and I'm sure you'll like her. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I finally understood the real reason why my husband wanted a divorce. He was having an affair, and he was trying to get rid of me, the obstacle to be with his mistress. I never thought my husband would cheat on me. Not because of his personality, but because I thought there was no chance for him to meet someone else. But I was wrong. He told me how he met his mistress. He met his lover online, and through texting each other every day, they developed feelings and fell in love. Because I only use my phone for minimal communication, learning about this whole online dating thing was bewildering. Looking back, my husband had been glued to his phone recently. Moreover, my husband, engrossed in his phone, seemed to be in an exceptionally good mood. Oblivious to my husband's affair, I would think to myself, it's nice to see him in a good mood today. Yet for all I know, he may have been secretly inviting that woman over to our place when I wasn't around. Just the thought of it was enough to make my blood boil. Despite our arguments, I had never once considered leaving him before. But now, after hearing his true feelings, I just couldn't imagine being with him any longer. Even if he took back his words and said, I don't want a divorce after all, I was now determined to leave him. As I made this decision, I heard a loud slap. Startled, I looked up to see my mother-in-law, her face twisted in an expression I had never seen before. My husband's cheek bore a red handprint. Realizing she had slapped him, I was taken aback. I would never have expected my mother-in-law to lay a hand on her son. She turned to me, deeply bowing her head in apology. I'm really sorry. I apologize for letting you take care of such a despicable son. She uttered these words, her face a mask of profound regret. Olivia, you're too good for my son. You've done so much for him, more than we could ever thank you for. My husband and I were looking forward to living with you two, but it seems you'll be better off without our son. We will make sure you receive proper alimony and child support, so please, go ahead and divorce him. My husband, his face beet red, tried to retort, but a glare from his mother shut him up. A different kind of tears welled up at my mother-in-law's words. They brought both relief and sadness. Regardless of my husband, I was saddened at the prospect of ending my relationship with my in-laws. Encouraged by my mother-in-law, I filled out the divorce papers. And just like that, my husband and I became strangers. After parting with my husband, I returned to my parents' house with my son. My parents said it was fine to stay with them until things settled down, so I decided to take them up on their offer. I planned to continue working as before, but discussed reducing my workload with my boss. I was considering changing jobs if needed, but my boss agreed to accommodate me without hesitation. To be honest, it took me by surprise. Apparently, my boss had been worried about my excessive workload for a while now. With a wry smile, he said, I was actually worried you might collapse one day, but knowing your situation at home, I didn't say anything. Feeling guilty, I bowed my head and apologized to my boss for causing him concern. He quickly shook his head, saying, No, it's just me worrying too much. But thinking about it, it's good that you left your ex-husband, and laughed. His words brought a smile to my face, and I nodded in agreement. I also told my coworkers about my divorce. I thought it would be better to let everyone know since I was reducing my workload. I was anxious about their reaction, but when I honestly told them the reason for my divorce, they threw a party for me. I was taken aback by this, but it was a relief that the atmosphere didn't become serious. Although I had awful luck with men, I had the best colleagues at my workplace. By the time all the paperwork had settled, I took our son and left my parents' home. We chose a small apartment as our new home. It was a far cry from the spacious house we were supposed to be living in, but our son didn't show any discontent. Perhaps because he no longer had to worry about his father, he became more vocal about his opinions and his demeanor brightened. It was a change that made me truly appreciate our separation from my ex-husband. The effects of the separation were apparent in me too. By the time I'd finished unpacking after the move, a friend came to visit and celebrate our new home. The last time we met, she was concerned of my well-being, but when she saw me today, she laughed and said that I looked younger than ever. I couldn't help but laugh along. Everything started going smoothly, almost comically so, after the divorce. I suppose my old self was under so much stress, physically and mentally. Now I realized I was merely a maid for my ex-husband back then. I still can't forgive my ex-husband, and I don't want to see him, but I do meet my in-laws once a month now. A while ago, my son got a fever, but I absolutely couldn't take a day off of work that day. And to make matters worse, my parents weren't available either. Out of desperation, I reached out to my in-laws. They immediately came over to take care of my son. We used to barely communicate due to the situation with my ex-husband, but since that day, we make sure to meet at least once a month. They thanked me for letting them see their grandson, but I was grateful that they still loved my son. Even after the divorce, my son occasionally mentioned his grandparents. He never said he wanted to see them, perhaps out of consideration for me, but he did ask how they were doing. After all, they were his beloved grandparents. To be honest, I didn't want to take his grandparents away from him, so it was a relief to know they wanted to see him too. By the way, my son never once mentioned my ex-husband. Even my in-laws knew that we didn't want to see him. However, my ex-husband had a different idea. I was utterly surprised when I heard from my mother-in-law that my ex-husband was considering getting back with us. I thought that things were going well with his mistress. According to my mother-in-law, the mistress moved in shortly after we left. It seemed like they had it all planned out. The mistress was delighted to see the new house and moved in without even getting permission from my in-laws. They were taken aback, but decided to act as if my ex-husband and his new partner didn't exist. At first, the mistress seemed pleased with the minimal interaction with my in-laws, but soon she started showing signs of discontent. Apparently, she thought that my in-laws would be helping with the household chores. She complained about it to my ex-husband. He then said to his parents, "What's this all about? Didn't you promise to help with the housework?" To this, my mother-in-law replied, "We did promise, but that was with Olivia, not with you two." And she ignored anything he said after that. Left with no choice, my ex-husband tried to get the mistress to do everything that I used to do. At first, she reluctantly did as told, but every complaint from my ex-husband caused more strain between them, and then his mistress finally went off on him. She slammed the divorce papers at my ex-husband, saying, "I'm not a maid or a nurse. This is not fun at all, and I can't stand being with you anymore." She left the house. I thought to myself, my ex is pretty bad, but that mistress is quite something too. My mother-in-law, with a bitter smile, commented that my ex-husband's behavior afterwards was the real problem. He refused to admit that he was at fault and blamed his mistress for getting dumped by saying that he got tricked by her. Furthermore, there was no one left to take care of my ex now that his mistress was gone. He couldn't rely on my in-laws either. As a result, for some reason, he thought that if we reconciled, everything would return to how it was. He probably has forgotten the things he did. He told my in-laws that he wanted to get back together with me and asked for their help. When I heard about this, I couldn't help but shudder at the thought of living with my ex again. My mother-in-law quickly reassured me, saying, "Don't worry, we firmly refused." My ex, scolded by my in-laws, gave up on seeing me but now wanted to see our son. My in-laws also refused this. Finally, my in-laws told my ex that if he caused any more trouble to me or our son, they would sever family ties and kick him out. This finally made him give up. It would be difficult for my ex, who was well received by his neighbors and friends, to live relying on others besides his family. I'm glad that my in-laws are not on my ex's side. From now on, I plan to make good use of my past experiences and do my best without pushing myself too hard. I also want to cherish the time with my son, make lots of memories that we couldn't before. Some say marriage is the end of the road, but not me. I'm 45 and single, but that's not why I'm avoiding the aisle. Life is fulfilling enough on my own, and I don't pine for a boyfriend. Still, at my brother's wedding, I did catch myself feeling envious of their happiness. His bride was rather charming, too, but the woman I thought was amazing turned out to be a whole different kind of crazy. My name is Emmy, 45 years old. I'm a single woman living alone. I may have given up on marriage, but not on life itself. Work is going well. I have a solid circle of friends, and life is good, all things considered. One day, a married friend asked, "What's your plan for old age?" I've saved up quite a bit, so I'm planning to hire some help and retire on a sunny island, I said with a smile. You would, my friend replied, laughing. I've paid off my house, and I've been reevaluating things like insurance to prepare for my future. For now, I've got no worries. I have my mother and an older brother, Aiden, in my life. Dad passed away 5 years ago, but Mom is still going strong at 70. Aiden is happily married. They had their first child 5 years ago and welcomed their second last autumn. Both are boys. Aiden is pushing 47, but his wife Lindsay is younger and seems to have no issues with childbirth. And my mom, who used to nag about me getting married and giving her grandkids, has backed off, probably thanks to the grandchildren from Aiden's side. I guess she's just given up on me. Sorry, but I've chosen a career-focused life. I'd appreciate it if you'd just spoil my nieces and nephews. Mom and Aiden seem so happy. As for me, I'm living the dream on an island down south. Life is great, except for one little problem. Lindsay, my sister-in-law. Lindsay is 12 years younger than Aiden and 10 years younger than me. Despite that, her attitude towards me is downright unbelievable. It all began 3 years ago. When my brother and his wife had their first child, I gave them a baby gift. Instead of saying thank you, Lindsay had the audacity to say this. Think giving us a gift will set you up for the future, Emmy? What? What are you talking about? Confused, I replied. She snorted and continued. Don't play dumb. You're hoping to rely on our kid in the future, aren't you? Huh, no thanks. What? I was just puzzled. What was she getting at? Just to be clear, I didn't have this kid to take care of you in your old age, so don't expect anything. Right. All I did was give a baby gift, right? I didn't say anything like that. What was she going on about? Frustrated, I mentioned it to Aiden. He called Lindsay for a discussion. Lindsay, Emmy just gave us a baby gift, okay? I'd understand if you were thankful, but why did you lash out at her? She blushed with anger and retorted. Emmy wants to rely on our child for her future. She's just trying to save money on caregivers. No. I simply gave a baby gift because Aiden had a cute child. Aiden was livid. Enough. Emmy never said any of that. She just gave us a baby gift because she's happy for us. That's it. So you're taking her side because she's your sister? That's not fair. She glared at me. I got yelled at because of you, Emmy. How are you going to make it right? You owe me. What? Suddenly accused, I can't help but turn serious. I was planning to keep quiet, but being misunderstood like this will just cause more problems. Listen, Lindsay, just like Aiden said, I only gave the baby gift to celebrate. No ulterior motives. Don't lie. I have good instincts. Whatever you think, it's not true. I'm planning to live alone in a distant place when I'm older. I'll be fine. You'll say that now, but you'll manipulate our kid to take care of you later. I've no plans to rely on my nephew. Lindsay kept ranting like a mad dog. She was beyond reasoning. I decided I wanted nothing to do with her. However, a few days later, Lindsay called to apologize. It seemed both Aiden and her parents had scolded her, and she was behaving meekly. I'm truly sorry for what happened, Emmy. Maybe it's just postpartum stress. I can't speak from experience about childbirth, but it seems that some women may view everyone around them as a threat right after giving birth. Is it some kind of innate parental defensive mechanism? They can often overreact, causing inconvenience to those around them. I told her, it's okay. You must be tired too. Just be careful from now on, and chose to forgive her on the spot. I only meet up with my brother's family during New Year's holidays or special events at our parents' house, but keeping good relations doesn't hurt. After that, I gave gifts to my nephew on his birthday and Christmas. Despite maintaining this relationship, when Lindsay had her second child last fall and I gave her another baby gift, she snapped at me again. This time she said, "Emmy, don't you think now there are two people for you to take care of? You're not considering adopting one, are you?" "What do you mean?" "Don't ever think such nonsense. Both are my precious children and I will never give them to you." "No, I wasn't thinking that. Don't think giving a gift gives you any control. I will never give my children to you," she screamed at me. This was a replay of that stressful experience and it gave me a headache. Is she bringing up that old issue again? Just like last time, she complains to me about her own delusions without any gratitude. Of course, this time Aiden mediated again. "Hey, Lindsay, you're still saying that? You already caused Emmy enough trouble last time." Lindsay glared at Aiden. "Aiden, are you planning to ruin our children's lives by letting a single woman take care of them? That's disgraceful." "Come on. Emmy would never do that. Enough. Just be quiet." I left the arguing couple and hurried home. I don't want to get caught in such trouble every time she gives birth. I decided that if they have another child, I will give the baby gift when Lindsay is not around. A few days later, just like before, Lindsay called to apologize, but I had no intention of forgiving her. "In the end, you and I are like oil and water. We will never get along. Let's never meet again. Goodbye." I said this over the phone and hung up without waiting for her response. I'm a 45-year-old single woman. I know society doesn't look kindly on that, and I do worry about my future. That's why I'm preparing now, planning to live alone without bothering my family. I never thought about relying on my nephews. No matter how much I tell this to Lindsay, she won't believe me, so I decided to cut ties with her. When I visit my hometown, I coordinate with my mother to avoid meeting my brother and Lindsay. I also stopped giving Christmas and birthday gifts to my nephews. Well, they are young and will probably forget about me soon enough. I was looking forward to seeing my nephews grow up, but the thought of them becoming more and more like Lindsay makes me not want to see them. During the New Year's holiday, while I was relaxing and watching TV, I got a call from Lindsay. Shoot, I forgot to block her number. Reluctantly, I answer the phone. "Hello? Oh, Emmy, long time no see. I thought you might be dead since you didn't come home for the holidays," Lindsay says, sarcastically as ever. "Happy New Year, Lindsay. I'm fine, so don't worry. Goodbye." I was really annoyed that she picked a fight right at the start of the year, so I hung up, not wanting to deal with her any longer. But as I was trying to block her number, she calls again. "You hang up on me? Really, Emmy, you're so impatient. That's probably why you're not married." None of her business. "I just want to relax and watch TV. I'm busy, so I'm hanging up," I reply, brushing her off. "Why are you being so cold? I married your brother, you know. I'm family. You should treat family with respect," she says, suddenly sounding righteous. "What are you talking about?" Ignoring me, Lindsay starts spouting nonsense. "You know what family relationships mean, right? Especially at your age. You should understand their importance." Huh? What is she even trying to say? I thought about hanging up, but I hold back, thinking she might just show up at my house. "So, what do you want?" "You're my children's only aunt, Emmy. You have responsibilities." "Responsibilities? Like what?" "Seriously? I'm talking about gifts for birthdays, Christmas, and graduations. That's what family relationships are about." "Really? After telling me not to spoil them with money, now she's like this? So what you're saying is because I'm single and have some savings, I should spend it on my nephew?" "Exactly. Your money will be happier too." "I can't afford to waste money. I need to save for my future, and I don't plan on relying on your children when I'm older. Wasting money on family isn't a waste at all. Yes, it is. She kept talking as if she hadn't heard me. By the way, my son's birthday is coming up. He'd love the latest gaming console. I'd enjoy it too. I've told you I can't waste money. But money spent on a cute nephew isn't a waste. What's the point of saving for old age? You're likely to die alone before that. Can anyone this unreasonable really exist? Why did my brother Aiden marry her? You've been taking advantage of my goodwill all this time, and now you suddenly claim it's as your aunt? Give me a break. Finally, I snapped. I can't hold it in anymore. Even though I'm already livid, an idea crossed my mind. So you really want a free gift, huh? Fine, you can have one, I said coolly. You really are the best aunt ever, Emmy, she eagerly sang my praises. So what kind of gift are you giving me? I'm thinking about the latest gaming console or maybe even a trip abroad. I'm ready. I've set the trap. I smirked to myself. The gift is the exclusive right to take care of my mom. How's that for a surprise? Wait, what? Her voice goes rigid. Ignoring her surprise, I continue. You know, my mom hasn't been doing well lately. She needs help, and I was supposed to do it. But I thought, hey, you can do it, and your kids get to spend quality time with their grandmother. What more could you want? Just when I thought I'd outwitted her, the voice on the other end changes. Don't be ridiculous. That's a single woman's job. Don't expect us to do it. It's Aiden, and he's furious. He must have been listening all along. I hadn't been in touch with Aiden for a while, trying to cut ties with Lindsay. Little did I know she'd already roped him in. You can't hurt Lindsay like this. I panic at Aiden's sudden outburst. Sadly, Aiden has now become an adversary. I have no other choice. Then it's done. I'm cutting ties with you too, Aiden. I'll tell Mom. You don't have to do anything. Hearing this, Aiden panics. Wait, we don't have to go that far. Mom wants to see her grandchildren, and I'm sure you want to see your little nephews. I've made up my mind. As of now, you and your family are strangers to me. Goodbye. I hang up. My mom, furious about what transpired, disowns my brother and his wife. They disappear from our lives. 5 years later, my mother passed away after a long battle with illness. Thank you for everything, she says, holding my hand on her deathbed. I'm so glad you're my daughter. I was drowning in grief, but as the person responsible for the funeral, I had to hold it together for my mom's sake. With great effort, I managed to pull myself up. The day of the funeral, with the help of relatives, we smoothly concluded the ceremony. Just then, a man in worn-out mourning clothes approached me. It's been a while. How have you been? It was Aiden. I had no idea where he'd been during the ceremony, but he was there with my 2 nephews. My nephews were engrossed in their mobile games, not even bothering to look my way. Thanks for asking. You don't look too great yourself. I know. We're estranged, but can we talk? Reluctantly, I agree. It's about Lindsay. What happened to her? Did she cheat? If only that were all. What then? She attacked the wife of the guy she was cheating with. That sounds like something Lindsay would do. Aiden continues. The woman my wife cheated with is blackmailing me. She said she won't go to the police if I pay her off, and now she's demanding a ridiculous $100,000. Because of Lindsay's affair, I'm broke. I want to pay, but I can't. So here's what I really wanted to talk about. He looks up at me with a desperate gaze. Don't even think about the inheritance. What? You're only here for Mom's inheritance, aren't you? Mom always said she wouldn't leave a dime to you two, especially since you never visited her, not even during her hospital stays. That's why I've had the property and savings put in my name. The rest of the family is on board with this too. Aiden said, I'm really sorry. Just save it. Lend me $100,000. Help me out. I'm desperate. During the funeral service, with other relatives present, Aiden expressed deep remorse. Too little, too late. All because you chose to listen to Lindsay over me and our parents. It's too late. I told Aiden and left the room. I have no grudges against my playful nephews and nieces, though. 3 years have passed since then. I haven't seen my brother and his wife. I heard from a relative that Aiden blamed Lindsay for her infidelity and ran off, leaving her to deal with the kids and the damages. She's supposedly working part-time at supermarkets and grocery stores from morning to night, after leaving the kids at her parents' home. My own brother, mistreated by Lindsay, cheated on, and then abandoned. He got what was coming to him. He left me with no choice but to turn my back. As for me, I've started a peaceful life on an island down south. Just before entering my golden years, I can see a splendid palm tree right outside my condo. No complicated relationships here, only the crystal clear blue sky and the endless beautiful sea. I plan on living on my pension in this affordable country. Next year, I'm hiring a live-in helper to take care of my chores. Sometimes I do think it would be nice to have someone by my side, especially remembering the painful times, like my feud with Aiden and my mother's sad passing. Even so, I continue to savor my peaceful island life all alone, day by day.
I really don't want you at the wedding. I don't want to associate with someone like you who'd resort to illegal means just to be popular with the opposite sex. I wish he'd cut ties with you. You're not fit to be his sister. What are you talking about? Before I could respond, the call ended. That was when Jackson was getting married. My name is Sophia. I have a father, a mother, and a younger brother named Jackson, 3 years my junior. Both Jackson and I chose colleges close to home to save money, so we lived with our parents. I went to a less prestigious college, while Jackson went to a top-ranked one. We continued to live at home even after graduation, choosing jobs nearby. But now, I'm unemployed. My recent company laid off about 100 employees, and I was one of them. I was in a good position in the company, so I never saw it coming. It's been about 2 months since I lost my job, but I have some savings. I'm taking my time looking for another job. Jackson, on the other hand, recently got engaged to his girlfriend and is living a charmed life. He's doing well. He earns a good salary, and he even gives money for rent and food to our mom. Mom once tried to refuse his money, saying, "You don't have to," but Jackson insisted. "Think of it as paying back for all you've done for me." He's such a good brother. We used to fight a lot when we were kids, but since middle school, he's been bigger and stronger, so we stopped fighting. In fact, he even looked up to me when I helped him with his studies. Well, now he's surpassed me in knowledge. As for Dad, he and Mom have been running a dessert shop for a long time. It doesn't make much, but Dad used to work for a big company, so they have a good amount of savings. "Seeing our customers smile is what keeps me going," he says, working enthusiastically at the shop every day. One day, as the 4 of us were having dinner, Jackson said, "I'm thinking of getting married." The 3 of us stopped eating, and Mom was the first to speak. "Oh my, that's wonderful news! When can we expect a grandchild?" "Don't rush things, Mom, and remember, I get to hold the baby first. No objections allowed." Both were clearly thrilled. I was happy for Jackson's happiness too. A few months later, as the wedding preparations were in full swing, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. I answered. "Hello? Is this the sister-in-law? I'm Lily, the one getting married to Jackson. Nice to meet you." Apparently, Jackson asked for my number and called me. I had seen her picture before, and she was stunning. I wondered where they met. "Nice to meet you. I'm Sophia, Jackson's sister. What can I do for you?" "I really don't want you at the wedding. Someone with your low education willing to use illegal means to be popular with the opposite sex? I don't want to associate with you. I wish he'd cut ties with you. You're not fit to be his sister," she responded cryptically. "What do you mean by that?" Before I could answer, she hung up. What was that all about? Did I do something wrong? I pondered for about an hour but couldn't think of anything. And why would I? I had never met her before. Yet, she called out of the blue with such a strange request. Isn't it normal for all family members to attend a wedding? Or is this some new wedding trend I'm unaware of? I decided to wait for Jackson to return home and ask him about it. But Jackson didn't come home that day. Apparently, he had decided to live with his fiancée before the wedding to ensure a smooth start to their married life. When I told Mom about what Lily had said, both she and Dad were furious. What is she thinking? A wedding without family? That's ridiculous. Absolutely. I wasn't angry at the time. I wondered if I had unknowingly done something, or if Lily had been fed false information about me. But my parents' anger didn't subside, and they decided that none of our relatives would attend the wedding. So it seems that no one will go to Jackson's side. According to Jackson, Lily's family members all graduated from top-ranked universities and held prestigious jobs. She felt embarrassed that her fiancé's sister, me, didn't have a stable job and attended a lower-ranked college. Dad was livid. Discriminating based on education? Ridiculous! Jackson apologized to me later, but we never discussed that topic again. When I told Jackson everything Lily had said, he was shocked. What? What does she mean by illegal means? Sis, you didn't do anything like that, right? It seemed Jackson was hearing this for the first time. When I denied it, Jackson said he'd talked to Lily. A few days later, Jackson called. It seems that the truth has been revealed. Apparently, Lily had been suspicious because of the drastic difference between my high school and college photos. That should be it. I was quite chubby in high school. However, after entering university, I realized that I would no longer be popular, so I went on a strict diet and dropped my weight from 220 pounds to 150 pounds. But Lily couldn't believe it. She struggles to lose just 2 pounds, so she believes I must have used illegal means to drop 70 pounds? Given my lower education, she thinks it's plausible. Jackson tried to convince her. She just worked hard on her diet. But Lily wouldn't listen. Even worse, both Lily's father and mother believed her and insisted I shouldn't attend the wedding. I was so taken aback by this that I was at a loss for words. I decided, with my parents' agreement, not to attend the wedding. A few days later, Lily called again. "Sister-in-law, you're the worst! Because of what you told me, we were humiliated." What? I didn't do anything. I just chose not to attend. I just didn't attend the wedding. The next day, Jackson called to apologize for Lily's behavior. "You let Lily walk all over you," I warned. Jackson replied, "I'm sorry, but I can't stand up to her." Apparently, one of Lily's relatives is a major client of Jackson's company. His career and future promotions hinge on staying in this person's good graces. If he upsets them, the business deal could be canceled, and Jackson could lose his job. I was more concerned about Jackson's situation and told him not to worry about it. A week later, Lily called again. I really didn't want to talk to her. "Sister-in-law, you're unemployed, but you have a lot of savings, right? If I get pregnant, we want to live on the second floor. Could you move out? It'd be better for our baby." I don't want to say this, but being around someone who'd resort to such means to gain popularity is bad for the child's upbringing. Indeed, my parents live on the first floor and I have a room on the second. She wanted to use my room for their unborn child. Without hesitation, I declined. "That's not possible. Goodbye." And I hung up. Although I haven't found a new job yet, I've been making money through Forex trading using my savings, and I contribute more to the household expenses than Jackson does. I was content living with my parents, and I had no plans to marry anytime soon. But I was worried that refusing Lily might affect Jackson's career. The next day, Dad was furious. "Why did you refuse to live with them? It's just living together. I always dreamed of living with my grandchild. Are you trying to take that dream away from me?" Dad's face is red and angry. I explained everything Lily had said. Dad calmed down. "So, they want to kick you out and take over the second floor because you're bad for the baby's upbringing? Unbelievable. But But if things continued this way, Jackson would always be under Lily's thumb. That's why Lily always calls me directly, not my mom. I told Mom, I'll move out. It should solve everything. Besides, they won't live here forever. Jackson always talked about living in a beautiful, spacious house. Dad was silent for a while, but then said, "All right," and hung up. A few days later, I moved out to live on my own. Soon after, Jackson and Lily moved into my parents' house. Lily began preparing 2 rooms, one for their baby and another as their bedroom. Half a year passed. Mom called me. Since they moved in, they haven't paid any living expenses or rent. But I can't believe Jackson would do that. I think Lily might be stopping him. Why do you think that? Well, Lily doesn't cook at all, uses the bathroom whenever she wants, and keeps the heater on all winter. The electric bill is sky high. She keeps saying she's about to give birth, but her belly isn't getting any bigger. Apparently, Mom was doing all the housework, including cooking. The next day, I called Jackson. "Jackson, how's living with Mom?" "It's fine. Lily seems to be getting along with Mom. I'm hardly home, but the laundry's always done and the room's clean. Make sure you thank Mom, okay?" "Thank her?" "She's doing everything. Laundry, cooking, cleaning. And I heard you're not even paying living expenses or rent. You should at least cover that." "What?" "Lily told me she's doing everything. I give the rent to Lily every week. Are you saying she's not doing anything?" It seemed Jackson was clueless. A few days later, Jackson invited everyone for dinner at their place. Mom made lots of pizza, my favorite. It seemed Lily was helping, but Mom told me she was just doing it reluctantly because her relatives and parents were coming. The doorbell rang. It was Lily's parents. As we all sat down, Mom said, "I hope you enjoy the meal, even if it's nothing special. It all looks delicious, doesn't it, dear?" "Yes, it does." Lily's parents complimented the food, making Mom blush. Suddenly, Jackson raised his voice. "Before we start eating, can I say something?" He turned to Lily. "You haven't been paying the rent I gave you to give Mom, have you? And what exactly have you been helping Mom with?" "What? Money? What are you talking about?" Lily looked panicked, glancing at everyone. "You told my sister to leave, didn't you? So we could move in. What were you thinking?" I always thought Jackson was quiet and focused on his career, but this was different. He seemed serious. Lily, flustered, said, "It's your family home. Why should we pay rent? It's not even a mansion, and I do the cleaning." "The one actually cleaning is my mom. And where did the rent money I gave you go?" "Not just the rent, you didn't give her the living expenses either. What did you spend that money on?" Turns out, Lily had been enjoying fancy French restaurants with that money. And she'd been treating her friends, too. Lily's parents both turned red and apologized. They didn't know the real reason I didn't attend the wedding or why Lily was so keen on moving in. "It's our fault for raising such a daughter. We're truly sorry." Then Jackson turned to Lily's mother and father. "I'm considering a divorce. Please think about it." Lily burst into tears. Lily's mother pleaded, "Please don't do that, I beg you," and deeply apologized to Jackson. My parents and I were shocked and looked at Jackson. But Jackson didn't stop. He turned to me and said, "Sis, I'm truly sorry. We'll move out, so please come back here. I've been weak and let things slide, but I realize I was wrong. I'm so sorry." Jackson said this with tears in his eyes. "You don't need to apologize. It's not your fault. But are you serious about the divorce?" Jackson, with a serious look, replied, "I am. Marrying her was a mistake from the start. She was overly concerned about educational backgrounds and even told you not to come to our wedding. She lied about expecting a baby, kicked you out to live in our family home, and pocketed the rent. Shame on her." Jackson shouted at Lily. Lily cried even louder. The food had gone cold. What a waste. "We'll take our daughter and leave now." With her head down, Lily left with her parents. Lily's father pleaded with Jackson to reconsider, but Jackson firmly refused. In the end, Jackson divorced the following week. I could have moved back to my family home as Jackson suggested, but I didn't. Living alone had its perks. Instead, I urged Jackson to return, and he did. Fortunately, Jackson's career wasn't affected. In fact, he was asked to keep the matter private to avoid family embarrassment. 6 months later, Jackson left his job to start a new business using his expertise. I'll turn our family's dessert shop into a top-tier company. He was enthusiastic, but Dad seemed a bit puzzled, saying, "It's fine the way it is now." As for me, I found a new job and a boyfriend. I plan to introduce him to my parents and Jackson soon. He's quite nervous. While marriage is still a ways off, I vowed to myself never to become a wife like Lily.